Good afternoon. It's the 12th of November in Australia. I'm in Darwin, Northern Territory, Australia, and today's spiritual conversation topic is connecting with the deceased. And it's interesting that the 12th of November follows the 11th of November, where we have a National Remembrance Day for the deceased, our deceased service men and women who have fought in battle, who have died, and who continue to serve. So we still remember those people. We keep them in our thoughts as well, and their families. So that was our celebration day yesterday, the 11th of November. And today, here we are with a topic connecting with the deceased. So I'm Margaret Lambert.
But also,
go on. I was just going to introduce.
Sorry, Margaret,
do the intros.
I was just going to say, while you're talking about the Remembrance Day and the fallen soldiers, I think today is actually Veterans Day in America.
Ah,
so
the 11th?
I think it is the 11th there now. So yeah, I think it's the same date. Yeah.
Yay. Come on in. So, yeah, I was just going to do the introductions so that people know who we are. I'm Margaret Lambert, psychologist, author and speaker, and I run spiritual conversations every Friday, and today's not Friday. However, tomorrow I'm running a training session all day, and it happens to be on grief and loss. So this will help me to be prepared for that topic tomorrow, where I'm training people who would like to deal with their own grief and loss, or to learn a little bit more about how to work with others. Vin, would you like to introduce yourself? I'm not hearing you.
Sorry, I muted myself.
Yeah.
I'm Vin Brown. I run Vintuitive, which is a web development, promotions and training business. And I'm located down here in South Australia.
Good one.
And I'm very excited to have this topic, because I think it's a really fascinating and interesting topic to talk about. So I have a lot of notes.
Oh, good one. You've come prepared. I haven't done a lot of preparation, but I've done a little bit of preparation. This area is the area I work in. Grief and loss is one of my common areas of work, working as a psychologist, and I work with people who have lost a child as being the psychologist for SIDS and Kids for the Northern Territory. And there are SIDS organisations all around the world. So working in this area is not a new thing for me. I don't put myself up as someone who speaks with the deceased and the dead. I'm not I don't know, what do we call those people, Vin?
A medium or a clairvoyant?
I was thinking clairvoyant, but I thought they predict the future, don't they?
It's more of a spirit medium or a channel.
Medium, yes, spirit medium. So I'm certainly not a spirit medium. So if people are joining this conversation for that purpose, it's not going to happen with me. But I do deal and work with a lot of people who are facing the very raw emotion of having lost a loved one, and connecting with the deceased is exactly what this topic is. However we connect with them, whether it is, hearing voices, feeling a presence. Vin, I'm glad you've done some research. What would you like to share with us about it?
Well, I'm glad you used the word connecting, because when I first saw the title, in my mind, I heard conversing or communicating, and even the words connecting with the dead is probably going to have that sort of connotation to it to a lot of people. But I like to sort of, as usual, step back and sort of look at it in a wider context before zooming in on any one particular topic. And I was thinking about how are the ways that we connect with the deceased. And the obvious one that came to mind was, of course, funerals. That's the whole point of a funeral, is to connect with the deceased and to pay your respects. And so, you're not necessarily communicating as such with the deceased, but you're definitely connecting with them. That's what you're there for. It's to connect with the person who's just passed away. Hey, Bruce.
Hey, Bruce. How you doing?
Good, thank you. And I was wondering, just to that point, Vin, how do you see the difference between connecting and communicating? I'm thinking that that there's not that much difference. In other words, connecting in communication, verbal, visual, auditory, kinesthetic. These are all different ways that I can think of connecting. Of course, we think of our senses first, yeah, and of course with the deceased not being physically there, that cuts off a certain amount of those naturally. I would imagine that.
Well, it's not quite true, because in the example I gave, the deceased body, the deceased person's body is often there at the funeral.
Oh, well, I didn't just mean at a funeral, but I meant when we're talking about connecting with the deceased after the fact, after quite some time after, even a day after the funeral or whatever. However it is that you're not generally thought of as being in kinesthetic contact with somebody or touch contact with somebody. I think that maybe there are other portions of our senses or other portions of our mind that we generally shut down because it's not logical to talk about that amongst sentient beings.
Yeah, but even on those points, sorry, there's a bit of a shush noise there. Even on those points, I think I'd like to just pull you up and correct you a little bit there, because you say that there's no kinesthetic communication. Well, often there is, even years after the dead person has died. You will go and annually often visit the grave and leave flowers and physically bring flowers and give them to the dead, leave them on their grave. Some people weed the grave and move, so they're physically interacting with touch, touching the person's grave, and the grave is the replacement of their body. Really, that's where the body actually lies physically. So, there is still a communication with the dead many years after the body has been decomposed, I suppose.
Yeah, I can see that there could be a difference there. Is that really connecting with the person themselves, or is that connecting with the area around the person or the remains of the person? Or
well, it's their memories, isn't it? Mainly, you're going there to remember them, to think about them.
Yeah. So on that level, you're connecting with the at the very least, the thinking dimension. You are thinking and having images, perhaps, of memories of times. So there's a mind connection at the very least. Yeah.
And the epitaph itself is also a means of communicating.
Yeah. 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 So what about direct communication? Because I know in working with people who have lost loved ones, often they will say, if only I could get a message, if only they would send me a message to let me know that everything's okay. Have either of you gentlemen heard of anyone, or a personal experience, or heard of anyone who has had that direct message reported?
Bruce?
I definitely have, yes.
You have?
Oh, yeah.
For yourself?
Yes. Yeah.
Would you like to share it or not?
Well, my mother passed away 2.5 weeks ago, almost 3 weeks. And so, of course, this conversation came up with much interest for me. And I have long known that, or I've long felt that my mother felt as if God was love. That's what she used to say to us all the time. You know, God is actually love. And in that sense, you know, without a lot more explanation, you get the feeling as if God is conceptual. God is also very real, very tangible at the same time. Because I believe very much that we have these feelings that start out as mental images, perhaps. For me, I'm a photographer, so I'm very visually excited. That's what my memory is really tied to, the visual and also the sense of smell. I believe that that's true for most human beings. And so I can be transported back to a particular time and hear all of the things, you know, in real time as I would have heard them when I was young, experiencing that time, and I can see her. And there are times when I will have conversations with her. You know, this happened before she died, actually, because she was 3,000 miles away from us. So we had no other way but to imagine certain kinds of conversations. And being brought up in an acting family, that became very easy. And I remember one of the things that I said to my mother many, many years before she was to pass. I said, look, you know, one thing you've got to make sure of is that you communicate with me from over there, wherever you are. Because if there's anybody to do it, I know it's you. Because it's such a dramatic thing. And so we made that kind of commitment that would happen. And I believe that while death is universal, I feel as if I've heard death is universal and grieving is personal. And I certainly believe that. I know that to be a fact. I also know that there isn't too much that somebody else can say to me that really would. I understand that people feel a tug, you know, in their heart when they hear a story or whatever, and they feel, and a lot of people feel, you know, like, I want to give you my condolences. I'm so sorry. But for me, it's kind of like none of that really does all of that. My conversation with my mother, that will do it, you know, so that I can be, you know, just like devastated one moment and just be talking to her like, I'm sorry, but I can't do this. I've got to go into a meeting. I cannot be devastated right now. Let's talk about this at another time. You know, or whatever it is that I feel that there is some kind of communication that needs to happen. I sometimes will just sit down and say, okay, you know, let's talk this out. Let's get with this. And I find it to be very calming. I don't know if some people find it amusing, but it doesn't too much happen. Yeah.
Hey, Raymond.
Hey. Gee, well, thanks for sharing that, Bruce. That's a beautiful story and a beautiful commitment between your mother and yourself. You know, sometimes when I talk or talk about this topic with connecting with the deceased, and people's reaction will be, well, it's just in people's minds. They're just imagining it because that's what they want to happen. That's a common response that I hear for the people that actually haven't experienced it themselves. And, it's how to field that skepticism, I suppose, because in working with people, I can't dispute that their reported experiences are real. I mean, we report our thinking and we call that real. So isn't it as real?
And even if it is like any type of a study, that uses placebos will bear the fruit of that particular argument. Like, at the end of everything, does it really matter whether somebody is or is not visited by, a being from another time frame? Does it matter whether, there really were other beings on this earth before we were here? Does it really matter that there are any number of chances of beings being on planets that, our universe is an amazing thing, but it's just our universe. There are so many other areas, so many other universes. And so the very idea that there is no more intelligent life than just right here is a very limiting kind of idea. So when you open up your mind and you say, well, what if that were to happen? Would it hurt anybody? No, probably not. And it's really okay with me if it's just in my mind, because I know that I can share an idea with you and you're alive. And that can be very, very real to us, can't it? We come up with the same idea. We may even make the same product. We may even come up with something that would forever change mankind's time here on Earth by way of something that we make in our minds. And then produce that item, and we do so at different ends of the scope. You in Australia, I think, or New Zealand, and me, and we come up with this thing. This is not too unusual. The many things were discovered at the same time without any contact between those people at all. Say that that isn't the same kind of energy that people tap into and that can actually use.
I love that point and the way you've connected that. That makes absolute sense to me. Raymond, welcome. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me. Just firstly, can you hear that fan that's in the background? Is it too distracting? It's just sort of, good.
No, I can only hear the hum of my air conditioning.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't, overcrowding. But look, I've missed the start, so I hopefully haven't missed anything too juicy. But
you're about to provide it.
I was listening to Bruce just a moment ago, and he was talking about intelligence, and an interesting point I think to sort of add into the mix is that a lot of people believe that just because they're speaking with a disincarnate or they're communicating with somebody that's passed, that they're going to have all this newfound wisdom, whereas in fact, a lot of times that's not actually the case. So, it's interesting. A guy by the name that I've spoken about before, Stuart Wilde, he studied at the psychic school of which was the major psychic school in London for some time, and he came to the point after a while that old Auntie Mary and Uncle Harry and that were really any wiser than what they were when they were here. It was nice that we could communicate with them and get in touch with them, and they were on another journey, and quite often they had a piece of information to give or something of value. But in general, the wisdom wasn't automatically, explosive just because they've decided to depart this plane and go on some other journey. So I just find that that's just an interesting point to raise, that quite often when you go to a psychic or you go to a medium or whatever, and they're saying, Betty's saying, you've the guy with the, with the grey hair that's coming into your life that owned the shop down the road and did all this, stay away from him or whatever. And it's like, you find out that later she actually hated his guts, and she didn't want you to go anywhere near him because he sold her a dud lotto ticket one time or something. So it's just an interesting sort of little thing to go into the mix.
Yeah, and Wayne Dyer says that heaven, or the other realm, is here on earth. You know, the people that are the people. Don't expect, that there's anything too much. You can actually be the people, be the person, and live in the way as in heaven. I suppose that's the Lord's Prayer, as it is in heaven, on earth as it is in heaven as well, which is interesting because, both Wayne Dyer and Anita Majani are saying it's people are the same in that life. And Anita's had that direct experience, she feels. Bruce, you want to say something there?
I would. I want to share just a little bit of another situation that happened with my mother. It was actually in the spring that my mother passed away and came back. So she was one of 3% of the people her age who actually came up. Then I went to her in spring after asking her to hang on. I was in the ICU care, and they actually, fortunately, or in some ways, they actually violated a DNR, a do not resuscitate order that she had. And in bringing her back, they kind of hurt her. They broke her rib cage. Several things that she dealt with for the next 6 months or so. So she passed. Were pretty, pretty big time. But the one thing that I asked her when she came back, I said, "Okay, now you got to tell me what was it like? What did you see?" And she said, "I got to tell you something. I didn't see a darn thing. No white robes, no white tunnel, no bright light. I wasn't pulled into anything. I didn't have any of that experience at all." And I said, "That sounds kind of unlike you. Boring. What? What do you get from that?" She said, "Well, I did see a leaf." And I thought, interesting. She was a nature lover from way back. And she was also a professional artist. So I said, "Was the leaf falling, or was it just static? Was it on the ground, on a tree, on a branch? Did it have color to it? Was it springtime, fall time? Give me some more." And I finally got that the leaf was falling, and she was looking out a window. And that's about all that we were about. And I find it interesting, when you say we expect all this wisdom to come from, some kind of experience. And basically what she was saying was, "Yeah, I didn't get any of that." So I thought that was interesting and amusing. And I wonder also.
So Bruce, can I just pull you up a little bit, because I'm not hearing, the sound's not great for me. Is that the same for everyone else?
Yeah, those speakers, I think you're feeding back, Bruce. If you had some earplugs, we wouldn't hear all the stuff coming out of your speakers.
Yeah, the storyline, I didn't want to interrupt because it's so interesting, but I'm struggling to actually pick it up now, a lot of it.
Let me go get those.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and Margaret, I did speak to you in that other blab that time about that experience with my father, and if anyone's interested, that
love for you to share it on this blab, because people are going to, if they're interested in this topic, this is the one they're going to pick this blab to listen to, connecting with the deceased. So please feel free to share it again if you'd like.
As I was saying, it was we were at the just having a mental block. What's the unit called where you go off to where they sort of basically just say your time's up and it's the end in hospital? The
intensive care.
ICU.
No, there's palliative care.
Palliative care, yeah.
Yeah, that moved him to palliative care, and basically they, in the end, the actual what he had not created the problem. He was basically just starving to death because they'd taken him off the drip and done all that sort of stuff. So really, the cancer and the different things hadn't done that. But he's a stubborn sort of a man. He wouldn't leave. He was there today. It turned out well because the whole family was there, and we've moved away. He had a routine every day. He would watch his game shows, do his the news would come on because he loved doing the dinner and doing those sorts of things. Do his dinner. And then he'd get to a little bit of, the current affairs type shows, and then he'd had enough of it and he'd get out of there. So I sort of had this feeling we'd all gone off to another room because he wasn't willing to pass at the time where everybody was there. So I had this feeling to come back to the room, like just a knowing. Saw my brother on the way through, and he said, no, he's all fine. But I just had a feeling I had to go and just see him, check on him, whatever that I was drawn to the room. Anyway, I walked in the room, and as I said to you, previously, Margaret, I had the that sensation or the real knowing of what that word of taken aback or taken back was, because I literally, I just stood back. I couldn't believe it. I saw my father as a young man, a younger man. Like, he was still a man, but he was a younger man, and probably the sort of the age when I was, like maybe 2, 3, something like that, probably about a similar age I am now even. And he was just, sitting in the chair, and I had to he was sitting there, and I had to double take, it was almost like he was just going to roll out of bed and put his shoes on and go and do something else. But I actually leant to call the nurses. I turned and actually went to yell at them, and then, the logic came in, and I went, okay, well, this can't be, something's not right. And I've turned back around, and he was obviously passed and had gone. It was a lovely, it was actually a lovely energy in the room. And like I said to you, the whole experience was I was lucky enough to have we've got quite an open family, a lovely experience, which I think adds to maybe these sorts of possibilities opening for people. But, on this topic, I saw, what I believe, his passing. So, that's just another little grab.
It's an amazing thing, like what you saw. Now, can you hear me any better?
It's still fuzzy. It's like you're underwater.
I'm so sorry. I'll get off because I know how distracting that is.
Well, thanks for your input, Bruce. I loved your stories. Shame that the sound's just not working out at the moment. So thank you so much. So
what a pity.
Yeah, he had some fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else who's there, feel free to jump in. If we're talking about connecting with the deceased, and I'll just share a personal story of mine, which I don't know that I've ever shared it. So why not share it on Blab?
Hey,
it's all contained.
It's only on the record.
Yeah. So our firstborn daughter passed away after 4 days, and I did not, in those days, the death of a child, a baby in particular, went pretty well unacknowledged and was swept under the carpet, and so it was like it was not acknowledged by anyone, and including my own family mostly. but everyone, that was the way it was, because people don't want to upset people. And there's some of that still lingers today, although I think we do a bit better. We're not great with death anyway. So it took me a long time, and it suited me not to acknowledge it. I just wanted to get on with life. So all of that worked for me. And so I didn't grieve her for, let's say around 18 years. And then things were going so well in my life. And I realised that I probably had to, think about this and do some work around this. Anyway, I got to a point where it was, where are you? Where are you? That sort of desperate plea. And I heard very clearly, I'm here, Mum. And I just was taken aback by that because I didn't expect an answer. and there was one. And I thought, wait, was that you? And of course, there was nothing more I could gather from that. But, it was very clear, I'm here, Mum. And I thought, well, I'm going to believe that. It was my experience. And like I say, I wasn't expecting an answer at all from calling out. But there we go.
Did it surprise you? How did you respond when you heard this? Did you think someone else was outside, or
no? I was at the beach, and so I knew there was no one else around.
Did it sound like it came from inside your head?
Yeah, it sounded like a very clear. Within
it wasn't like someone standing on the beach.
No, it wasn't another voice, but it was like the words, however they were presented to me, they were the words I heard. And it did surprise me. It was a long time ago now, well, not so long, not as many as 18 years ago, but it certainly had me think then that these reportings of people I work with now, I don't disregard them whatsoever.
Mm. Well, I'm really interested in exactly all the details, and especially because, like if it's happening in your head, or if it's an external sound, because, and I've talked even before how I've put my earbuds in for the first time when I got my MP3 player, and it really felt as though the sound was coming from within my head. So, I'm not dismissing it by saying the sound where it comes from or anything like that. But I think that, when someone passes over and they no longer have a body, what is it that if there is some kind of continuation of existence, it must be in an energy form, that they take all those senses that they had that relied and used bodily organs like ears, nose, taste, eyes, tongue, all of these things are the physical components that were used to detect all these things, and without them, do we have all those? So, in other words, can we communicate with a dead person or an entity once they no longer have a body, because they no longer have those tools that were used for communication? And so, by hearing the voice in your head, it seems like there's a way of bypassing the senses to directly get to the person, if that makes sense.
It's funny. I have a psychic friend that she smells things and she tastes things, and she quite often smells and tastes things from other places, which to me is quite interesting in itself, that there's some sort of transference in between distance of smell and taste, and I don't discount that, because there's a couple of things that she smelt that, I'm not a big fan of saying, of psychic being an answer. So I just want to be really clear on that. But a couple of times she's talked about, she's sort of one of these people that you'll be having a normal conversation, and then she'll just talk about something, and she'll say, I smell this, and then it correlates later. We find out that it was actually because who she was picking up on was at the sewage farm or something. I just went to the extreme, made that example up. But I just wanted to pass that on, just to say, well, with what you're saying, that there must be something external or a transference of energy that can correlate to these things that we have in bodily sensations. It's just a thought. But just an interesting one on what you had, Margaret. After my father passed, I really went into a bit of a hole, and I was really struggling with it for a little bit. And I was asking a lot of questions, as I do, and asking for communication and things. One day I was asleep. My son was up watching a show, and I was dead out. And all of a sudden, this his show that he was watching finished, and these lyrics to a song just started just pounding. I actually went to go mad on him. I woke up because I thought he'd put the stereo right next to my head as a joke or something to wake me up, and was playing this stereo. And I've had to wake up and find out and go out and find out what it was. And it was the end of a cartoon movie of all things. And this song was on at the end. Trailers and everything were coming up. And I had to quickly go and research who the band was, and I Shazammed it actually, and then went and found out who it was. And this is what came back. It's a song by one Eskimo called can you believe that? It just went off. Called Amazing. And it says, I'll just go through it just really quickly because I know that we've time constraints. It just says, I feel sweet. Do you feel sweet? It's amazing. I have no skin and I feel everything. It's amazing. When I feel good when you feel good, and I knew I would. It's amazing. I wanted this for so long, and now the deed has been done. We shall rise with the sun and spread our time as one. Now there is no sin in anything, and it's amazing. I love life. I hope you do too, because I love everything, and it's amazing. I feel you. Do you feel you? I understand when they say we are born again, because I feel born again. And I'm born again, and it's amazing. And it's the best thing. It's glorious. It's glorious. It's life-changing, this feeling. It's amazing. And it goes on. The whole sort of song is like that. But it was pretty amazing, for lack of a better word.
So that's just to recap then. You got that because it just only the lyrics came to you in your head?
Well, I just kept hearing that, I feel everything. It's amazing. It said, we are one, and it was just pounding in my head. And honestly, the television room is a long way away from the bedroom. It's not, you would do the same thing, but I honestly thought someone put a stereo to my head and was blasting. And I actually got up in to get mad on him to say, what are you doing? This is, that's not the way to wake up, Dad. but that's sort of an okay, all right. I hear what you're saying, and obviously it was a bit different to that lovely experience that you had, Margaret. But I found it very, and even just reading that, then I felt quite connected and quite at ease, and very much assured that it was, a form of a message for myself.
Yeah. Wow, that's wonderful. Are you seeing Raymond, Vin, or is it only me?
No, I'm not
Where
seeing him.
Where have you disappeared to, Raymond? We hear you very well.
But I believe he is actually going to be there in the video by the magic of the internet. I don't know how that works, but often when we can't see them, they actually appear in the recording afterwards.
Okay.
But maybe you could just refresh, Raymond.
No problem.
Yeah.
There's been quite a lot of discussion in the comments here, and if anyone would love to jump in, there's another seat open.
Yeah, there's a spare seat, yes.
Because it is very tricky to respond to these quite deep questions that are happening on the sidebar while people are in the room. There was WPC guys got some great stuff going on there.
Yeah.
He talks about the Bible, and there was some biblical stuff that I was looking at, and I've had some a lot of conversations about this with Jehovah's Witnesses and other people, and there is a lot in the Bible that doesn't go well with communicating with the dead, and in fact there's quite a lot of passages in the Bible that forbid it, but I'm not actually aware of the thing that he's talking about, or he is a WPC guy. I also wonder how many among you here recall how King Saul of Israel used a spirit medium to speak to dead Samuel, which is really a demon pretending to be Samuel. And that's what the Bible teaches, that it's if you've any communication with a dead or a deceased spirit is actually the devil impersonating deceased spirits in order to trick you.
Well, yeah, that's interesting, because I actually went to a lady once, and somebody mentioned psychic, so she has a psychic ability. I didn't go for that reason, but I went because she did Reiki, and she happened to say to me, if anything comes to me, during this session. Do you want me to tell you? Well, I didn't know what she was talking about. And I said, yeah, sure. You know, I went to her because I had heard she did very good work. And so, sure, I didn't know what that meant. Well, she said, now, there's someone very special who's passed, and her name starts with E. And I said, oh, that's my daughter Elisa. And she just went one thing after the other. It just rolled out, and the accuracy was phenomenal. And so there is someone, I just said, I can't believe, and I came away, the moment I walked into the home, after being so depleted, that's why I went, I was so unwell, I came home and my husband just looked at me and said, gee, you look better. So whatever it was, you know, it was the Reiki, it was, I don't know, this spiritual connection. She rattled off so many things. She said, you know, things that nobody could ever have known. She said, you've got your father's rosary, your mother's rosary beads. And I said, oh, yes, I have my father's rosary beads that were given to him by my mother. And she said, they're very dear to you. And I said, yes, they're under my pillow. And it's just, you know, a connection, you know, and who would ever know that? It was the accuracy, as I say, it was phenomenal. And to come away feeling amazing in my health, and for my husband to have noticed that you look better, because I wasn't in a good place with the chronic illness, I don't see how that can be demonizing. To me, the evidence is when things are moving forward or looking better. And I think sometimes when we're caught with decisions and we think, you know, to me, I always say, what's going to be the most life-giving? And that's one way to look at it. And so this was certainly life-giving. So maybe the Bible does, you know, demonize it, or, you know, it's the work of the devil. But I can't abide by that when the direct experience is that I'm uplifted. I feel much better. My health began to improve from that point as a result of that experience.
How can that be a bad thing?
Yeah.
So that's really amazing when that sort of thing happens. I'm just a bit concerned about Kinder over here in the side.
Well,
would you be able to jump in,
yeah,
Kinder?
I saw WPC tried to jump in. It got a flicker and didn't. So I'm wondering if there's a glitch in the...
No. Well, WPC guy's explained. He said he's on an iPad too, which is an older...
sorry.
It's just a bit slow, he said.
I'm a bit slow at reading all the comments too. Kinder Foster, that's... feel free to, and if anyone wants to jump in. Do you have anything you want to add there, Vin?
Well, you know, my dad is a very skeptical type of person, and I think I am as well. But he's also, I was also sort of raised in a spiritual church, so we used to go to regularly. So, you know, a little bit open-minded at the same time. And I think that's the best sort of skeptic, or that's a true skeptic, is one that sort of just really wants to see the evidence, doesn't really want to disprove it, just wants to have the evidence. And so he went to a psychic, and the psychic said, there's a friend of yours, name starts with E, or whatever the letter was. And he said, oh, yeah, well, tell me what his name is then. And he says, his name's Eddie. And he says, yeah, what's his last name? And he says, Baxter. And he goes, oh, wow, that is my name's friend. And he died in the Korean War. What? How did he know? And he knew everything. And he just gave him exact specific details. the year of his death, everything. And yeah, from then on, I think my dad has been convinced that there's something very real. But then there are a lot of charlatans as well.
I have a little rule of thumb, just getting back onto what you were saying before about, lower energies or entities or whatever you wish to call it. Pretty much if anything ever is telling you should do this or you should do that or it should look that way, then I pretty much am not interested in any of that kind of stuff. If something feels light and expansive and there's no directive, there's only, choices put in front of you, then you pretty much can be of assured like that it is of you. And I have a basic saying that if something feels lighter, then it usually is, and if it feels heavier, then the same goes for goes for that point of
yeah. You expressed it much more eloquently than I was trying to. Yeah, that's a wonderful way to express it. I do have this book of Dr. Wayne Dyer, that I did read from last week. Well, whenever we talked about, I forget why I read from it before. But I have read from it in a previous blab. And I had a look to see about connecting with the dead in this book because it's Memories of Heaven. And this was Wayne Dyer's last book before he passed. And it's about children's stories of connecting with the dead. And there's different ways, different chapters, different sections. There's memories of past lives. There's memories of heaven with children having come to earth. Memories of choosing their parents. So it's an interesting book. And so I've looked for today for connecting with the deceased. And so I'll read a couple that are short ones. So these are all the stories of children from around the world. There are some from Australia in here and mostly from America, of course. That's where Wayne is from. So this one doesn't say where from, but it's from Roxanne Basford. My youngest daughter, Holly, visited and played with her sister Leah for years, even though Leah had died 6 weeks after Holly was born. How did she know her? Holly talked about her sister in the present, and it would bother me so much that I would tell her to stop talking about Leah. Holly is a young woman now, and we talk about the fact that she did not know that Leah was dead when she was young. That's one story, yeah. One other from Tyler in Texas by Karen Craver-Stanbury. When my granddaughter was 20 months old, she reached through the railings of a second-story balcony, waved into thin air with a smile on her face and said, "Boggy." This was the name of her great-great-grandmother. My daughter and I started crying. We both knew at that moment the angels were present. It was a great honour. And I've just got one more. They're only very short, these ones. It's from Hemet in California, Bob Bowman. I know that my mum was there. It starts over here. When my mum died at the age of 90, my granddaughter Sophie was 2.5. As we adults sat around for several days doing all the stuff you have to do when someone passes, I made the comment, I wish Mum was here. She'd just love all this stuff. Sophie pointed down the hall and said, but she is here. She's right down the hall. I know that my mum was there and my granddaughter saw her. We adults couldn't see her because we were too far removed from spirit, but Sophie and Mum were right there. So it seems like this book's full of children's stories, just short excerpts like that. And it seems that because they're closer to having come from a different realm, that they have the greater memory, and that as we become enculturated into our current realm, if that's the word you use, the enculturated, we lose the memory of what it was like.
You've got a very technical,
and that's the gist of that.
Got a very technical term for it, Margaret. It's called less stuff.
Sorry, I missed that, Raymond.
A very technical term for it. That, you know, I said it's called less stuff.
But it's really, it's a very real thing that is observed by, is accepted or acknowledged is the word, by science, that when we you know, like if we were sitting in a car at an intersection where there's millions of things happening, and you have to sort of, you know, block a lot of it out, and a lot of the normal things that we've seen before as adults over and over and over and over again, we just take one or two little visual cues and we go, oh yeah, that's the sandbank, or yep, that's the stop sign, or yep, that's a, you know, we don't necessarily look at all the details because we don't need to, and in fact, if we did, our brain would probably overload with input. So, you know, it's actually just a normal known thing that we tend to be less analytic of all of the normal things that are around us. So, you know, it sort of makes logical sense that a child who hasn't yet turned off all those stimulations is wide open to everything, because they're new to the world, is going to perceive and look sort of more intently at everything. You know, they even have a term for it, don't they? The wonder of a child, or I don't remember, no, I'm not sure what the term is, but you know, they talk about the innocence of a child and that observation that they have.
Yeah, it's funny with my own son. He was raised very much coming from, facilitating consciousness classes and things like that, and then taking that time off to raise him. Particularly when he was younger, he was allowed to sort of say or do, or, you know, when I say or do anything, you know, within boundaries and reasons, and we would point and add directions and ask questions. It was sort of a conscious parenting type of method. But as he went to ordinary school, you saw more and more of that, and less of those little wisdoms coming through. And now it's a point where you have to actually actively encourage him to look in other ways, to be able to perceive things other than what you're asked to perceive at school, or what you're asked to perceive, you know, by your parents or your peers or whoever around you. So it's an interesting thing to watch, I think.
Yeah.
You know, just
go on.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to bring it off topic a little bit and sort of again come back at another angle of communicating or connecting with the dead. And you know, often I always bring up the topic of Bach, because you know, Bach was communicating to me about an hour before this session started. And, you know, I really do feel the spirit of the music, and he has invested in that music, a part of his soul, if you want to put it like that. And though that music does convey that very, very effectively. So I am connecting with Bach, or he's connecting with me in a way.
Well,
you know, it is a way, some way.
I have a question, Vin, you know, about that, because I have a lot of questions, as you know, but I wonder how much of a vibrational, because we think very, would you say one or two or even three-dimensional at times here, and we're stuck in the way of thinking. And, you know, what if, you know, some of Bach's resonance or his vibrational capacities or his, you know, and that is still here of growth and still growing in some way and can connect and can do that, you know. And I ask these questions sometimes because it's like we've just decided that this equals this and this equals that. And I, you know, when you say that to me, that makes me feel like we were saying before, very light, that yes, you do have a connection, and that, you know, and it's your connection and no one can take that from you, you know.
Yeah, well, some people, when I say that to them, will say, "Oh no, that's a dead thing. That's a static. It was done and it's over." And but it's not true. And I was actually on the weekend. A friend of mine came over, and he's a classical pianist, and I was showing him some of Bach's music that's been redone by heavy metal artists, and we were quite amused by it all. So it's being reinvented and it's a living thing, and perhaps even the works of Shakespeare is a more of a correct example, because those works of Shakespeare are constantly being reinvented and reapplied to today's situations. And so the works of Shakespeare are like a living thing, and he is communicating or connecting with us. There is a component there, because coming back to what I was saying before, once the body's gone, do we really expect that they're going to be able to have ears and all of these senses that we know that come from that rely on physical organs? And do we have to think so rigidly about someone in the afterlife as having a physical form and having all of those attributes that a human had when they were on Earth? It's not necessarily.
Yeah. Well, if I can just draw from Anita Moorjani's talk in Experiencing the Other Realm, and somebody asked that very question, Vin, what was it like? How did you recognize your father? How did you know it was him encouraging you to go back, that it's not your time? And she said, well, I didn't see him. There was nothing that I could recognize physically. I just knew it was him. And I can't explain that. There was just the sense. And then she had a sense of her best friend as well, also encouraging her to go back. It's not your time. And she said, I just knew it was her, however that was presented to me. There was nothing I could recognize in a physical sense that I can explain, other than knowing.
The emotional bonds, then, the love, even, if you were to call it that.
Well, yeah, and then you referred to the dimension of music and Bach and reaching that spiritual connection, if you like. I experience that, and many people do. It's often reported that music, and particularly classical music for me, can get to reach a part of your soul that nothing else can. And I can be listening to a piece and, have tears pouring out, with not knowing that there's nothing going the matter. It's just, it resonates so deeply that no words, no conversation with anyone could do that to me. So what is it? And Raymond, you referred to, it's the level of vibration, that vibrational energy, that we're connecting with. I don't know what it is, but I know that there is definitely a physical reaction from many people that's reported, and particularly myself, in listening to certain types of music.
Well, music is one of those times that I perceive that we do, move a little bit away from our stuff, as we were calling it before, and we get out of our heads, or get out of our judgments, or get out of our, all the obstacles that we put in our way. So it makes a lot of sense to me that music, can assist us to that, with the vibrations within it and everything like that, to move. But another little thing that just I think is worth just passing on here for what it's worth, something that, used to look into a while ago, was the fact that when, grieving someone that's passed, quite often we hold a piece of them closer here, and hold some part of them or some part of their vibration here in some form. And I was just listening to what you were saying about Anita Moorjani, in the sense that I know that I had some dreams about my father early days, where he would appear to me as in the same look of my father. And then as time went on, I could still picture his face, vividly in my daily life, but the energy changed. And it was as the whole family seemed to get cleaner and clearer about the passing and all that sort of stuff, it seemed like he had moved to some sort of other place, vibration, or something more, what I would say, of greatness. Or so it's just another little thing to add in. I didn't mean to take us away from the music and the vibration. I just it was something I thought would be valid for some people, because I know that sometimes with the grieving we hold on to people and don't let them move to whatever is next.
Yes. I am noticing the time. It's 1:02 on my computer clock. So we've been talking pretty well for an hour on this topic, and I'm just wondering if there are any last words of insight or wisdom, personal expressions that you'd like to offer. Ben?
Yeah, I have just one little topic to put forward and have people maybe think about. Is there a way, is it possible for us to prepare in advance a way for us to communicate with the living after we pass over into the other world? And there is, that's what a time capsule is, isn't it? We put together all of the thoughts and everything. We even write messages and put them into a time capsule to be uncovered after our deaths. So that we can communicate to the future what our time was like. And in fact, I'm actually doing that very thing. We're building a pyramid for that purpose. It's called the Earth Pyramid. And you can go and read all about it at the earthpyramid.org. We're building in Malaysia, and we are giving the opportunity to every child or every school in the world to write a message to the generations of the future 1,000 years from now.
Wow, that's so interesting. When we were, my husband and I were the two teachers at a two-teacher school at Adelaide River, and we did a time capsule with our kids. And so they all wrote something creative, right? Whatever they wanted to put in it. And my husband Gary got a bit of polypipe or something, and like it was all wrapped in preservative stuff and alfoil. And anyway, it was 25 years later.
Wow.
They were having some celebration, and Gary reminded, like, we're no longer in Adelaide River, of course, I'm in Darwin, but we were contacted for this celebration of the schools, having been, teachers there for a couple of years. So these teachers didn't know about, because it was buried in the ground. And so he had to direct them, give them directions as to where to find it. And we were invited down for the unearthing and the uncovering then. Wow. That was part of the celebration. And these children that we taught then, of course, they're all adults and have their own children. They mulled over it. It was a frenzy. Oh, look at this. And Jock's store, which is the local post office store, the one store in Adelaide River. Well, there is one other, but it's the post office store. Might have been a 30-year. What would Jock's shop be like in, say, 25, 30 years, whatever the time was? Well, it was going to be like this Coles supermarket. It was going to have, all of this stuff going. It was going to be air conditioned, da-da-da-da-da. Well, we had a chuckle about that because the world's moved on, but Jock's shop is still the same. So, yeah, very, very funny. So, and an interesting exercise to do. So 1,000 years, it will be phenomenal. And what a wonderful resource at that time.
You planning on being there for the unveiling of
I was hoping that maybe I could sneak in there, get my ashes deposited in there somehow.
And we've got some ongoing conversation here in the side, but we are winding up. So thanks so much for all the people who have been active in the comments as well. It's been terrific. And thank you, Vin. Thank you, Raymond. Did you have any last comments you wanted to say, Raymond?
No, just thanks for having me. It was a pleasure to be here with you guys and your company again.
Always our pleasure. My pleasure especially. Thanks, Raymond. And Watch out for those sharks down there, hey?
Yeah. Staying away from Byron, that Byron Lennox area. I've heard this. Down that way.
Oh my goodness! Yes, I'm getting worried now. Okay, I'm going to pause the recording. Thanks everyone for joining in. Catch you for the next spiritual conversations topic, of which I haven't said yet. It will be announced via Twitter and the other channels. Thanks.